Hi, my name is Alex Kahn. I'm a songwriter from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I'm going to talk a little bit about my new album, The Marble Jar, which comes out on December 11th. So the Marble Jar itself, the name of the record, is a reference to a self-help technique that my mom was really into when I was growing up. She was always ahead of the curve with all that kind of stuff, crystals, diet things, self-help, anything under that umbrella. And basically the Marble Jar was an actual jar, and every time you express positivity or gratitude or excitement or optimism or pretty much anything Oprah would be into, you put a marble in the jar. So great idea at its base, but I thought about just expanding the concept of the Marble Jar so that it could be a place to hold things that might be a little more complainy, a little bit more pessimistic or nervous or sad, or things that you might not necessarily be proud of or want to wear on your sleeve. But I think this is really important, to kind of bring your whole self to the table, because those things are there, and it's just better, I think, to accept them and welcome them, even when we might not want to. So these last couple years have been really, really some of the most difficult years of my life, and it seemed like every aspect of my life was being uprooted in some way. I moved from New York City, where I lived for about 10 years, cross country to LA, and then I moved back to Philly after about a year or two. I had left my job in a dramatic fashion, and there were even change that was good change, such as falling in love and ultimately getting married to my partner, was still, an emotional roller coaster. And I think it just felt like every single thing was changing at the same time, and the volume was just turned up to 11 on all those things. And the most harrowing of all of these experiences really was that I lost my dad to cancer very abruptly. And it was really difficult, and the experience really, really shook me. And I found myself questioning a lot of things that I hadn't questioned before, even things I haven't just given much thought about, like spirituality, mortality. And I was really just confronted with all of this in one foul swoop, and this album is kind of a record of that time. It's really an attempt to just kind of pick up those broken pieces, because I just felt like everything was just shattered on the floor. And I think art and music has always been a way for me to just kind of attempt to make sense of these things. So in these songs, I was really kind of trying to capture the very unsexy parts of life. So what I like to call sometimes the nooks and crannies of daily living, and really just put them up to a microscope. Because for me, like, turning 30 kind of had this effect of where my brain just slowed down. And all of a sudden I was like, wow, this is what the world looks. Is this how most people see the world, where things aren't moving at a rapid pace and my emotions aren't just off the charts? And obviously that's not just one day I woke up and it was like that, but I think that whole kind of late 20s, early 30s experience can feel like that. And it's a little terrifying and it's a little strange, but it's also freeing. It's also liberating in a lot of ways too. In terms of the writing process, I wrote most of these songs in LA. And I had been working previously as a jingle writer in New York for a few years, so I got really used to writing music in the computer right away and using the studio as an instrument. It was fun, and I learned a ton, and I do really like that more abstract way of making music. But for this album, I just had this desire to just throw all that to the side and just kind of get back to the basics of songwriting, where I would really not even open up the computer until I felt like the words and the basic chord structure and all that stuff was, above a certain threshold where I was like, okay, I could get behind this. And then getting into the computer and doing the arrangements and collaborating with people. And that was a pretty trippy process in a lot of ways, but it also took me back to kind of how I used to write songs when I was just starting, when I was 12 or 13, and just playing horrible guitar and trying to write some songs about my life. So, that being said, it kind of led to a much more narrative album, because I was really, really focusing on the lyrics, and I really wanted them to be very literal and directive to a point that's almost uncomfortable, to put so much of the actual details of my life onto the page. I also wanted to find a way to shoehorn some humor into my songs, which I had done before but never really just dove in and really attempted to make some comedic knee slappers. For example, I have a song called In Love with My Therapist, which I think is maybe more of a comedy song than a song, whatever a song is. But that was a really, really fun experience, and I just got to kind of flex this other like humor muscle that I had not really tried to use in my songwriting up until now. And writing in LA itself was a really, really beautiful experience. I'm definitely somebody who suffers from a little bit of seasonal depression, so living in a place where December rolled around and we're like, oh, it's not going to get below 55 degrees, is it? This is pretty incredible. So I loved that, and I spent a lot of time writing these songs outside, hiking or at the beach, or just being outside as much as possible. And a lot of long walks where I would think of lyrics and melodies, and I try not to write things down, especially with the melodies, because I wanted them to be organically memorable, so when I would get back to my house, if something stuck with me, then I knew it might be something that's good. But, you know, the jury's still out on that one. So I actually recorded the whole record in Philly. All the songs were written in LA, but by the time we were ready to lay them down, we were back in Philly. So I got to team up with one of my longtime friends, who is a super, super talented producer and guitar player and piano player. And we'd actually fallen out of touch for a while, a couple years, but I sent him some of my demos and we just hit it off pretty much instantly. And it felt like we kind of had picked up right where we left off, which I think really speaks to the magic of making music together. We wrote so many songs together when we were teenagers, and I do feel like some of that really, really stuck with us. And I got to record at Turtle Studios, which is this fantastic studio in South Philly, and it's this kind of big, old-school space with these kind of low light lamps from the 70s. It just feels very out of place in 2020, but I really liked to be able to kind of just literally and metaphorically lean back on those big the plush kind of velvety couches and just make some great music. So that was really a special experience. So that is it. That's the Marble Jar. I hope you get to check it out. I hope that you resonate with some of the songs. And you can find me on Instagram is mainly where I'm at. I would love to talk more about the music. If anybody wants to talk, that's where you'll find me. So thank you.